Okay, let's get serious.
Oh. Genesis 5. Who feels like reading? Who can read?
It's the Reading Rainbow. It's in a book. Come on, right? You remember the song?
This is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day that God created man, in the likeness of God made he him. Male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam in the day when they were created. I think I'm going to end right there. Well, it seems like there's a lot to talk about just in them two verses, and it talks about his age in the next verse.
Mm.
And then it just strikes me as odd that he made he him, and then he calls male and female him or them. And then he calls both of them Adam.
Yes, I think. I don't know if I think I may have made this point when we went through chapter 3, but just in case I didn't, I'll bring it up here. It looks like Adam named his wife Eve.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Apparently, God called them both Adam.
And Adam gave his wife the name Eve, which means mother of all living. I think as Adam's way of showing that he had faith, that he believed God's promise that the seed of woman would crush the head of the serpent, that the man seemed to believe what God said was going to happen, the promise God gave. So he
That's
gave his wife
interesting.
an interesting name.
Did he mean the mother of all living would be believers? Or, what did that he mean by that?
That's the thing. It's difficult, right? Because we don't know exactly what was in their minds. Like, do we think that because God just originally said that it was going to be the seed of woman that crushed the head of the serpent? So, I mean, it's very possible that Eve could have thought that maybe she was very sorrowful when Abel died. I mean, maybe she thought that Abel was going to be the one, or maybe she thought one of her sons was going to be the one to. Of course, ended up being Jesus 4,000 years later, but I guess that's the difficulty, trying to figure out what was in their minds when these things were taking place.
Anybody else got anything for the first two verses?
What's that, Rob?
Anybody else got anything for the first two verses?
Well,
Is that God? That's capital G. Was that so it kind of settles well, I guess it doesn't really, but it settles the question, when who's speaking when he says created man in our image. Huh?
That's a good point.
well, remember back in Genesis 1:26, God says, "Let us make man in our image." But then I think it's verse 27. The very next verse says, "He made them." So it's plural. Let us make man in our image. But then the next verse, it's he singular is the one actually doing the creating.
Yeah,
So
I'm not
yeah.
who created it.
Yeah. What's that?
I never had any doubt about who created them. It was more
Who's he talking to?
talking to.
Yeah. Well, we know
Although
John.
the council would be also in the likeness of God to a degree.
Yeah, I mean that we already know we've already proven that the angelic beings were already in existence before the physical creation. So he certainly could be talking to them. We also know John 14 through 17, Jesus talks about himself and the Father as we, us, and our. So uh, it definitely could be either one of those.
I mean, if we want to open that door a little bit, if he created them in our image and then create them in the image of God, then the us or the divine council would be gods too.
Well, it does claim that they're gods in
Well, yeah,
not
it claims
God.
it claims they're Elohim, right?
Right.
Which is just a location. It's just in the other realm. Have we
Anybody
talked
else
about
have
what
anything on the first two verses?
well, I don't know if we ever brought this up before, but in chapter 1, but God making them male and female, all this debating and all this stuff that we have going on. For any future listeners out there, the culture that we're living in the year 2023 has become insane. People think men are women and women are men, and a person is a they them and all these different things. Well, this kind of shows what happens when you fall into absurdity, when you depart from God's original design of male, female, and when there's more than one, it would be they or them or we or us or our. So you kind of people get all crazy when they depart from that pattern. So did anybody talk about, have we had any conversations about what it means to be in the likeness of God?
Well, we don't think it's physical attribute.
Yeah, I mean, we use our other Bible knowledge, like John 4:24, God is spirit. So like God doesn't have a physical body like what we have, but somehow we're like him.
So are we a human having a spiritual experience or a spirit having a human experience?
Well, if we're like God, I would say that we're spirit, just like God's spirit. I mean, not just like, obviously he's eternal, we've been created, but just like in the sense of God is spirit, we're also spirit. But we're here on earth, so we've been temporarily given a corruptible, flesh and blood body. But the flesh and blood body is not who we are, it's something we have.
I wish we'd have recorded what we had the other night.
Yeah.
You know, what you're saying, Andrew, just a moment ago, if you read like King James or Brenton, I think people could definitely argue against what you just said, but other versions, like easy reading versions, don't really lend to that. But the Brenton and King James could be argued pretty much counter to what you said.
For which verse?
The first two, because it says in King James, it says, "In the likeness of God made he him, male and female are him, created he them." So they might argue against that.
Well, he makes male and female, right?
Well, he
Right,
made,
but he called in King James and the Brenton, he calls male and female him.
Well,
Because-
do you think that's because they were both called Adam?
is
They're
it
both
because
called
he pulled out of his side?
right. That's what I was thinking.
Mhm.
But my point is there's clearly a distinction between male and female. Like males don't have babies.
Not yet.
I thought you were going to say something else, Andrew.
I mean, as we keep going here in chapter 5, it does talk about what was it, verse 3? Adam lived 130 years and he begetteth a son.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the Bible doesn't really mention the lady as begetting the son.
Even though, right, which is interesting because I mean, people say like the Bible was written over a period of time when it was a patriarchal dominated society, culture. But even in the midst of all that, you do have Genesis 3:15, the seed of woman.
Mine says he fathered a son in his own likeness. It's interesting how it says in his own likeness.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, when you think about it, all of us as humans, we remember the verse. I showed some verses the other night, like Zechariah 12:1, that it is the Lord God who forms the spirit of man within him, or gives man his spirit. I showed that verse. I think it was somewhere in Numbers or Deuteronomy that talked about God is the father of spirits, or Hebrews 12 talks about God's the father of spirits too. Spirits of all the earth, of men, spirits of men of all the earth.
Yeah, but Adam was created in God's likeness. And then it says that he fathered his son in his own likeness. So what happened between then and the garden, right?
Well, but all mankind is still created in God's likeness and image. Genesis 9 and James chapter 3 and First Corinthians, all three of those chapters teach that mankind is still in the image of God, is still in the likeness of God, even though we've also got the likeness of Adam, you could say, or the likeness of our
Father.
of our father. So we have both. We have both.
Oh. The days of Adam after he fathered Seth were 800 years. Can you imagine 800 years, you guys, of living on this earth? Would you guys like that? The
Well,
way
no, probably not the way it is today. Probably was a lot different back in those days.
Another thing to talk about is the Septuagint versus the Masoretic in verse 3. According to the Brenton, for the Septuagint, Adam lived 230 years and begot a son after his own form and after his own image. He called his name Seth.
Makes it 100 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if the Septuagint is in Bible Gateway?
I've never found it there. I always use a Bible Hub.
I wonder why they don't have it on here.
I don't know. When it comes to New Testament Greek, I use Bible Gateway, but I use Bible Hub and other stuff for Old Testament stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What does Adam's name mean?
Man, doesn't it just mean man?
Um, hmm. It says same as H-120. Adam, the name of the first man also placed in Palestine.
So I just want to throw this out there before we get too much further. First, because I mentioned Genesis 9, 1 Corinthians, and James 3. We don't have to look at all of them, but I'll bring up this one. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 7. For a man should not have his head covered, since he is the image and glory of God. But woman is the glory of man. But where it says here that man is the image and glory of God, that is present active participle in the Greek, showing that this isn't talking about Adam. It's not aorist tense. It's not in the past. This is at the time Paul's writing this letter in the first century. He is saying that man is still in the image and likeness of God. Just throwing that out there for any future Calvinist listeners who think that the image likeness of God has been corrupted or lost or whatever since the fall, and now we're not in that order. So I'm just throwing that out there.
I don't know if this means anything, but I just had this thought. Okay, God creates man and he calls, the church his bride. And then Adam, is his bride, or Eve is the bride. So it's kind of interesting that, Eve was Adam's helper, and then you have the church, which is kind of like God's helper, you know, proclaiming the gospel wherever you go.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good point about the helper. Ephesians 5, husband and wife, Christ the church.
Adam chose to die for her, with her, for her. She was deceived, he wasn't.
Well, and Adam chose her over God, right?
Seems like it.
But what does Jesus say? He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Like,
My point is, though, he willingly sacrificed himself for his bride.
did he?
Well, obviously, he made that choice.
Right, but did he do it? But it could also be viewed as he chose to love his wife, the fleshly things of this world more than he chose to love God. Like in contrast with the righteous people like Abraham. Abraham chose to love God more than Isaac.
I would still say it's a
It seems a little bit of a foreshadowing of Christ sacrificing his life for
that's how I've
the
always been.
church.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, could.
It's like, to me, it's a foreshadow for sure.
Yeah, something I've never thought of before. Today was kind of the first thing where I kind of thought about, some of Adam's choices. So that kind of makes sense what you're saying, Maury.
And it's difficult because we could always read so many different things into these things, but it's like which is the right perspective on them, right? Because you could say,
Could also say that it's also man's downfall, obeying a woman.
right, right. And like you could also view like what is the motivation or what is the perspective? What do we think the perspective is in the text? What is it actually saying? Like with when it says the man, remember when God came questioning them, and you know when the man said, the woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave to me and I ate. Well, you could read that as, well, he's trying to put the blame on her. Or you could read that as, hey, he's just trying to be as honest and truthful as he can be. Like, let me just tell God the truth. This is what happened. I'm not trying to hide anything, or I'm just telling you what happened. I'm just trying to be honest.
But think of Samson. What was his downfall, right?
Yep. Yep. Solomon.
Mhm.
David, even David.
David, yeah. King Saul, not Saul, Solomon. Did you say Solomon?
Yeah. Solomon and David. Well, we talked.
What's somewhat interesting, I was just, you got me looking at that I never really noticed before is, okay, Eve, like, gets tricked, right?
Mhm.
And Adam doesn't get tricked. Well, Eve, her curse is pain to herself. You know what I mean? Pain in childbirth, the physical. But I guess, well, Adam does have physical pain, having to work, but also the ground outside of him is cursed.
Right. Like it seems like maybe there was more curses because of what Adam did. Like it would make sense that there'd be more curses because of Adam, because God originally gave that command to Adam, and as far as we can tell, God might have given that command even before woman was created. So maybe God held Adam to a higher degree of responsibility. Like God doesn't step in. Like as soon as the woman ate from the tree she wasn't supposed to eat from, God doesn't just step in right there. Like he waits until the man sins.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess I never really thought about it before. Why didn't he intervene, right when Eve?
Mm-hmm.
Guess we really don't know for sure.
Well,
It's interesting.
man has more than one rib, right? No way to prove it, but I've always wondered if what would have happened if man refused to eat, if he refused to sin. Would God have just removed her from the equation and just took another rib?
I wasn't sure where you're going with that more than one rib thing.
It's just so interesting, though, all these different things that we can speculate and think, because, we weren't there. We don't know.
Okay. If the
Anybody got anything else on the first two verses?
It sounded like Sandra said something that got cut off. Is she still here?
I don't know, am I?
Oh, there she is.
Am I gone?
You're back. What were you saying?
Oh, well, if the man represents Christ, we know from the New Testament, And if we think in futuristic terms that way, I mean, God basically allowed us to sin, right? Like, he doesn't stop us from sinning per se.
I mean, that's like you say, like a foreshadow.
Yeah, it's kind of like, and yet, did you say something? Maybe you said it earlier, Rob, that or somebody did, that it was like Adam went ahead and ate with Eve because he chose to die together with her, right? So like maybe he willingly ate knowing that he would die. And isn't that what Christ did for his bride? Like he came and died for her too.
Yeah, that's what Laurie was saying.
Yeah, so
What if
kind of makes sense.
But Andrew's
what
right. He directly disobeyed God and obeyed his wife.
Yep.
And that is a fall of a lot of men.
It even says it. It even says it. It says, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and eaten of the tree that I told you not to eat from.
Yeah,
Right?
right.
Mhm.
Which Christ doesn't do. He, right? Like he comes and dies for us.
It was the will of the Father for sure, yeah.
Yeah, in our sins. He doesn't sin along with us and then die, but gives his life for us. It's like he's correcting. It's like he's correcting
It's
what
interesting though. He
what
did become
Adam
sin.
did.
He became sin, but he didn't become sinful or a sinner,
Yeah,
which is
that's
why
interesting.
I think that everything you read in that chapter, Genesis 3, about what sin brought shame. Like they knew they were naked, they were ashamed. Like they weren't ashamed before sin. So sin brought shame, sin brought a curse, sin brought sorrows, sin brought pain, sin brought death. Everything that sin brought into the world, Jesus dealt with. He was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree, right? He became the curse for us. He had sorrows for us. Obviously, he experienced pain. He experienced death. Like everything that sin brought into the picture, Jesus dealt with.
Did someone just join?
Sandy dropped and came back.
Gotcha.
But are we ready to keep going through chapter 5 with the genealogy here?
Yeah. Maybe a little further. So I'll read from, let's start with the King James and stick with that. So even though the Brenton mentions 100 years difference, I brought that up. So Adam lived 130 years and begat a son in his own likeness and after his image, and called his name Seth. The days of Adam after he had begun Seth were 800 years, and he begat sons and daughters. And all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. Let's see.
930 years, eh?
So,
Yeah, I mean, definitely didn't make 1,000.
yeah, I was gonna say, as we're gonna see, nobody in this chapter makes it to 1,000.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, that scripture kind of comes to mind. A day is as 1,000 years, 1,000 years is as a day with the Lord. I know.
Oh, the
Everybody
diff-
debunked-
the different interpretations that people can employ with that verse.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Well, I
it
mean,
never
then he definitely would have died that day, if that's what it means, according to God's view. You know, God said, "You will die this day." You know, the way God looks at things, he did die that day.
I think there's some people out there who have the view that if man never would have sinned, after 1,000 years, they would have been able to go into heaven without
What?
having to. Yeah, I've heard of some people with the view that that's the reason why no one made it to 1,000. And if man never sinned, then after their 1,000 years of testing to see if they would follow God or not, after the 1,000 years, they would get to go into heaven without having to experience death. And they would say they would be like Enoch and Elijah and people like that, even though Enoch was taken when he was 365 or whatever it was, what wasn't even 1,000. But I guess that's coming up. We'll get into that when that comes up.
Well, I guess what I was wondering earlier today, I don't think there's any answer, but because we said, like, what if they didn't sin, right? Would they have lived forever?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about the animals?
Yeah, see, that's what I wonder too. I don't know. See, I don't know if the Bible is
I
really
mean,
clear
would
on
they
that.
died or would they lived forever too?
Well,
And if they would have died, then it seems death would have been there before even.
yes, there's there's a lot of debate. I've heard a lot of debate in the past on that topic of when the Bible talks about like death came into the world through man. What kind of death is it talking about? Is it talking about any kind of death at all for all creatures, or is it specifically just referring to human death? Lots of debate on that.
Mhm. Do we know all the children of Adam and
No,
Eve?
I think it's Josephus or somebody I read talk some commentary or some source. I think it was Josephus. I can't remember. I think tradition was that Adam and Eve had like 20 something or 30 something kids.
Mm.
No clue if that's right or not, but I will throw out there that for all the people who want to know where did Cain find his wife, well, here's your answer.
His sister. He married his sister.
I don't know why people think that that's so weird.
Where's it? Where's the answer?
Genesis 5 verse 4. I
I've
don't
read.
know. I literally don't understand why people act like that could not. That's out of the realm of possibility because look what happens with. Guess who Moses and Aaron? Moses and Aaron were brothers. Guess who their father married?
A woman?
Yeah, it's definitely a woman. His aunt. Exodus chapter 6. Moses and Aaron's dad married his aunt. So we act like it's such a crazy concept or out of the realm of possibility for Cain with his sister or Cain with his aunt or Cain with his cousin. It's like, dude, look at Moses and Aaron. And that's way later on in the story. So
Look
we
at the
shouldn't be shocked. So we shouldn't be shocked by something like that.
look at the royal families.
Oh yeah.
Lots of inbreeding there.
Yep.
It's just that it's a new thing now, right? Against the law.
Oh yeah. It's a I think like our world, our culture is so much different from like what we're reading in the Bible.
You know, you hear of siblings that have been separated and they get back, they meet again unknowingly, even knowingly, and they'll marry.
So I did look it up. Josephus supposedly said Adam and Eve had 33 sons and 23 daughters.
Okay, that's what it was. See, that's why I thought I can't remember if it was 20 or 30. It was 30 something and 20 something.
Hmm.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because if you're living to be like 930 years old, and God commanded them be fruitful and multiply.
What's the most children somebody's had, say, in the last 100 years? I've heard one woman had 63.
63?
Yeah. I can't, don't quote me on that, but
That's crazy.
well, I guess if you had lots of triplets and that kind of thing.
I guess if you started out when you were young,
Yeah. You want to Google that, Rob?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's physically possible. Like if a baby, you had one baby every year, that'd be 63 years.
No, I think she had the triplets and
Quint, quint,
isn't it?
quintuplets.
69.
69?
yeah.
Russian lady.
There you
When
go.
was this? When was this?
Sometime in between 1707 and 1782. So that would make her, what, 75 years old? So she would have started having children at the age of 6. That doesn't quite make sense, does it? I guess she, like Lori said, okay, she had twins, 7 sets of triplets, and 4 sets of quadruplets.
I think she was trying to get in the Guinness Book of World Records. They had that back then.
Catholic
Gracious.
control.
I can't
Be
even
right back.
fathom that.
It was against Catholic religion, right?
Well, there was somebody who took seriously God's original command to be fruitful and multiply. That was probably something that they had up in every room of their house, hanging over their bed. Be fruitful and multiply.
Yeah.
All right, where did Rob read to? Verse 6. No, 5. All the days of Adam which he lived are 930 years, and he died. Before we get to it, because it's coming up, everybody remember who the oldest person in the Bible is? It's in this chapter.
No.
Methuselah.
Methuselah?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it's 969, but I can't remember. It's coming up. We'll read it here in a second.
It's interesting that they started having kids till they were over 100.
Well, kind of makes sense when you think about it, because if the average lifespan is 900 years old, I mean, that would be like, that's kind of the equivalent of people having kids like in our time period, with like when you're 15, 16 years old.
Yeah.
If your average lifespan's 80 or 90 years, then
Was their maturity level that way as well? Did they
yeah, I don't
mature-
know. That's something else that I don't think we really brought up or talked about before. But when God made man and woman in the beginning, it seemed like he just created them mature, just like every other part of his creation. Like it didn't seem like he made man and woman as babies, because he created them and gave them the command to be fruitful and multiply, which isn't something you can do if you're a baby.
Yeah, and apparently they must have known right from wrong before
Mm-hmm.
the good and evil knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had mental. They were able to speak and walk around and communicate. Mental capacity to understand things. Be able to procreate.
Andrew,
Yep.
who were the ones that Cain was worried would kill him? Who were they?
I think Genesis 5:4 is the answer to that as well.
Okay.
Just like Rob just said, there was like tradition says they had like 50 something kids. So
So,
any
50
one of them.
about it.
So he was
Had 50.
thinking futuristically.
Well, we don't know. Well, do we know?
Maybe not.
Do we know
Yeah, we don't know
necessarily?
how old Cain and Abel were when
Right.
that all went down.
And it's possible. We don't know what the situation was like, and it's also possible that yes, he could have been thinking that way, especially if people are going to be living to be 800-900 years old. He definitely could have been thinking if they were young at the time. Let's say he was only like 100 years old or something. That sounds weird to say that. Let's say he was really young, like a young guy, like 100 years old. He definitely could have been thinking futuristically if they're living to 800-900 years old.
You know, I thought that was weird that, okay, and we'll see it. I don't know. We'll see it in this chapter, but you know, it says they were such an old and they died. They were such an old and died. But Abel, we're not told how old he was when he died.
That's true because he didn't just die; he was murdered.
Okay. So does that mean it was a spiritual death then?
Well, it makes
Kind of
well,
weird.
it makes me think that all these other people that are dying are just dying of natural causes in
Right.
Genesis chapter 5, whereas Abel's was definitely not natural causes.
Did Abel go to be with God right away then?
I don't think he went to heaven because I don't think anybody could go into heaven until Jesus came. And went into his parousia. Nobody could go into heaven until the first fruit, Jesus, went in. But he definitely went to some place of paradise, Sheol, Hades.
It's in the book of Jubilees here. It says Adam and his wife mourned for Abel 4 weeks of years. And in the 4th year of the 5th week, they became joyful, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bare him a son, and he called his name Seth. And he said, Yahweh has raised up a second seed unto us on the earth instead of Abel, for Cain slew him. But it goes on to, this is where it also says, and Cain took Awan his sister to be his wife, and she bare him Enoch at the close of the 4th Jubilee. And in the 1st year, the 1st week of the 5th Jubilee, houses were built upon the earth, and Cain built a city and called its name after the name of his son Enoch.
In any of those books, does it talk about what they believed about Abel when he died?
About Abel?
Yeah, like when Cain killed Abel. I wonder if any of those extra books have anything to say about what they believe happened with the spirit, the soul of Abel.
And in the 3rd week in the 2nd Jubilee, she gave birth to Cain, and in the 4th she gave birth to Abel. And in the 5th she gave birth to her daughter Awan. And in the 1st year of the 3rd Jubilee, Cain slew Abel because Yahweh accepted the sacrifice of Abel and did not accept the offering of Cain. He slew him in the field, and his blood cried from the ground to heaven, complaining because he had slain him. And Yahweh reproved Cain because of Abel, because he had slain him. And he made him a fugitive on the earth because of the blood of his brother. And he cursed him upon the earth. That's a fugitive because of the blood. You think of criminals, right? They're always a fugitive on the earth.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what Cain was, a vagabond, a wanderer,
And think about, I mean,
the
for the
land
rest
of
of it,
Nod.
for the rest of his life, I mean, if tradition is true, I'm not saying it is or isn't, but if it's even somewhat true that they had like 50 something kids, I mean, any number of them could have wanted him dead.
And on this account, on the heavenly tables, cursed is he who smites his neighbor treacherously, and let all who have seen and heard say, so be it. And the man who has seen and not declared, let him be accursed as the other. Justice, right?
Did I'm sorry, did we talk about why in verse 3 does it say Adam begat a son in his own likeness after his image and called his name Seth? Like, well then, like why is the Bible pointing that out? Wasn't Cain and Abel after his likeness and image? What, I don't, did we talk about that?
It says that Abel was after his likeness and image, but it doesn't say Cain was.
Where does it say Abel
Hmm.
was?
Hang on one second. Okay. I remember looking into that one time.
And if this has happened after Adam sinned, then isn't his Adam's image and likeness sinful? Wouldn't that, I mean, what?
Well,
After
you
his
might,
image. So was
you
the
might,
first two after
you,
God's image? Because she says, I have given birth or I've
or
received a son from the Lord.
all humans are still created in God's likeness and image. You might have dropped earlier, but I brought up Genesis 9, 1 Corinthians 11, and James chapter 3. All three of those chapters show that mankind is, as a whole, is still in the image, likeness of God. Um,
Yeah, that's why I
but
find this verse is strange to say that Adam had a son in his own likeness after his image. What does
well,
Seth mean?
oh man, I used to know the answer to that.
Guys? Oh, not Seth. Abel. Has anybody done that acronym with all the sons? That was kind of interesting.
Not yet. Well, I figured we would do that. We have to do that at some point before we're done with the chapter.
Yeah.
But
Oh, the name means compensation.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Compensation.
It does.
Okay.
Abel was in his image either.
What's that, Laura?
Doesn't say that Abel was in his image.
Okay. So what I was thinking is the reason why. So it doesn't say Cain or Abel was, but it does say Seth was, and it makes me wonder. When God made Adam and Eve in the beginning, um, they were said to be created in the image and likeness of God. And we know that all mankind continues to be created in the image and likeness of God because the verses that I have alluded to. But starting with their offspring, like with Seth, onward, not only are we created in the image and likeness of God because we have a spirit, like God is spirit, we're also spirit, but we're also created in the image and likeness of our parents, right? Of our human uh, parents, just like Adam and Eve's offspring. So it's like I brought, you might have dropped off, Sandy, but I brought that up earlier that I think it's both. I think we're created in the image and likeness of God and in the image and likeness of our physical ancestors. So, both.
It's just interesting he brings it up. Because we were, remember, before we came on, we were talking about the serpent seed doctrine, which, like I said, a lot of people do kind of believe that that could be a thing.
Well, and it's interesting to think about that we're, if we're in the image and likeness of God, that means that we have some attributes or some characteristics that are God-like, that are like God. I mean, there are some characteristics, or there are some things that God has that solely belong to him and no one else, like omniscience, omnipresence, omnipotence, things like that. But other things God shares with us as humanity that we are like him in the sense of we have love, we have an innate sense of justice and fairness, and
We have creativeness.
yeah, I think be able to communicate and reason, think logically, all these different
Yeah.
kinds of things.
We're
And so
able to rule over our dominion, unlike the animals.
right, and to also be able to create people after our own image and likeness, just like God created people after his own image and likeness. So
Right. Right.
yeah. All right, we want to keep going here. I don't know where Rob went. Guess we'll keep going.
I'm here. Just listening.
You want to read, Rob, or you don't? Anybody feel like reading?
Yeah, you can go for it, Andrew.
All right, I think you read to verse 5. Verse 6. And Seth lived 105 years and begat Enos. Seth liveth after his begetting Enos 807 years and begat sons and daughters. So all the days of Seth are 912 years, and he died. Enos lived 90 years, begat Canaan. Enos lived after begetting Canaan. Hold on, I gotta change this. This Young's literal translation is tripping me out. Hang on a second. Get a different translation here. Verse 9. Enosh lived 90 years and begot Canaan. After he begot Canaan, Enosh lived 815 years and he had sons and daughters. So all the days of Enosh were 905 years and he died. Canaan lived 70 years, begot Mahalalel. After he begot Mahalalel, Canaan lived 840 years and he had sons and daughters. So all the days of Canaan were 910 years and he died. Mahalalel lived 65 years, begot Jared. After he begot Jared, Mahalalel lived 830 years and he had sons and daughters. So all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years and he died. Jared lived 162 years and begot Enoch. After he begot Enoch, Jared lived 800 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Jared were 962 years and he died. Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. After he begot Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. I'll stop there because I know we'll want to talk about Enoch.
So I was thinking, does the Bible say when Cain died?
If it does, I would think it would have been in the previous chapter, in chapter 4.
That's what I thought too, that it would have been in there, but I can't find it anywhere on Google or anything. And so I'm wondering, did Cain and Abel die before Seth, basically?
Well, now that I look at this, in chapter 4, when it lists the descendants of Cain, just like Genesis 5 lists the descendants of Seth. Genesis 5, which lists the descendants of Seth, it tells you how long they lived and when, and they died. It doesn't say that about anybody from Cain's genealogy.
It says here in Jubilees, it says, and Adam and his wife mourned for Abel 4 weeks of years. And in the 4th year of the 5th week, they became joyful, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bare him a son. That was Seth.
Well, that makes it sound like it was pretty early on.
And that would make more sense in the storyline of who did Cain think would kill him, but if that's true, then there still shouldn't be people to, if Cain killed his brother and they didn't have Seth until shortly after,
Well, if
it doesn't quite make sense.
Well, if Cain is, we don't know how long he lived, but if Cain lived somewhat in the ballpark of what these other people did that we're reading in Genesis 5, he was going to be 800 or 900 years old. If he still had another 600-700 years to go on the earth, he certainly could have been thinking, well, while I'm wandering about on the earth,
That's not my point.
Think about it.
Try to say it differently.
I know what you're trying to say.
All right. Let's say you got Cain and Abel. They're the first ones, right? Let's say they still lived 130. Okay. Well, who else did Adam and Eve have if Seth was the next one in line? See what I'm saying? There wasn't any other children.
If he was the next one in line, well, okay, we can say that he is, but we're not 100% sure, right?
Well, I mean, it's the book of genealogy of Adam. Why not mention all these other children?
I mean, does it list all their names?
Well, verse 3 seemed to come after Seth.
I've always wondered if it's possible that this is the genealogy of Israel, so to speak. Was there others on the earth? I mean, I don't know.
Well, this is definitely not the genealogy of just Israel, because Noah comes from this line, and then from Noah's 3 sons, you get all kinds of people, not just Israel. So like from Adam to Noah, or from Adam to Noah's sons, it's way more than just Israel. Like Israel's just from one of Noah's sons, from Shem.
Possible that there was creation outside the garden at the same time.
I mean, if there's creation outside the garden, that makes me wonder about a lot of other scriptures now. Was Adam really the first man? Did any of the people outside the garden, did they sin?
I'm just questioning out loud.
I mean, it doesn't make sense because Seth basically replaced Abel, right?
Yes.
So if Cain kills Abel, how in the world does Cain say, who's gonna, people are gonna kill me, if Seth is the very next one?
Why would people want to kill him?
Well, I don't know. He says that to God. He says, this is more than I can bear. People are going to kill me.
But
God
why?
says, no, they won't kill you.
But why? Why would he think people would even want to kill him? Who would have
because there'd have to be other people, you would think. That's
right.
my point. But,
right. But my point is, who would even have motive to kill him?
Anybody, because he's a killer.
Well, but do they know that?
Well, who's these other people, though?
Well, I don't know why we think they have to be alive right then and there when he says it. I don't. If he's going to live 800 more years, I don't know why we don't think he can't be speaking in the sense of, throughout my life while I'm wandering around, when these people find me, they'll kill me. Like, I don't know why it has to be right here, right now. If it's going to be another 800 years.
Let's just go back to that.
But in my mind, it makes perfect sense with Genesis 5:4 that they had other sons and daughters because, hey, if this dude killed our brother, we got good motive to kill him. He killed our brother. Let's kill him.
Yeah, but they don't even know him yet.
Right. But I guess he thought they would. Like if they're going to live 800-900 years old, they definitely would have an opportunity to see him, I would think.
I don't know. That seems a little presumptuous on a
Well,
little
either
thoughtful
way,
on Kane's part to like say, "Hey, I'm worried about people way down the road killing me."
well, I mean, if I knew I was going to live on the earth for another 800 years, I would definitely be thinking about a lot more than just right here, right now.
Okay, let's just skip that idea. When did Cain have sexual relations with his wife?
Sometime before he died and sometime before the flood. I don't know if we can narrow it down further than that.
I mean, is Enoch mentioned in chapter 5?
Yeah, the Enoch that we just read from Seth's lineage, we just read that.
No, the Enoch from Cain.
No, to my knowledge, there's not anyone mentioned in Genesis 5 that's from Cain. Like I think Genesis 5 is all about Seth's lineage, whereas chapter 4 is about Cain's.
Those lineages are completely separate,
Right.
which I find pretty interesting.
I find it interesting that chapter 5 talks about how long they lived, but chapter 5, which talks about Seth's lineage, tells you how long they all lived. It doesn't tell you that with Cain's.
I mean, you both bring up two good questions. You know, why even separate them if there's not something different going on? And then why doesn't anyone die? It seems like in the evil
Mm-hmm.
lineage.
Right.
But yet then Enoch was righteous.
Well, Enoch, right. Enoch in Seth's lineage was righteous.
It wasn't
No, not in Cain's.
it wasn't Cain's Enoch. Okay.
No, different Enoch.
Hmm.
They were city builders. Cain's
Mm-hmm.
conglomeration there.
Yeah, because Enoch, um, he
Radar.
was, yeah, he comes through Cain, right? It's Cain knew his wife, she conceived and bore Enoch. But in chapter 5, Enoch is the son of Methuselah. Which comes from Seth. Two different Enochs. So what do we think it means about in chapter 5? All the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God. He was not, for God took him. It actually says in verse 22, Enoch walked with God 300 years. What does that mean? Enoch walked with God 300 years.
Which verse we got?
Chapter 5, verse 22.
Means the age of accountability is 65.
Or was, you know,
Well, this Jubilee says Seth took Azerah, his sister, to be his wife, and in the 4th year of the 6th week, she bare him Enos, and I'm assuming that's Enoch. And he began.
No, Enos is earlier.
Yeah, Enos was right after Seth, back in verse 9.
We're down to where Enoch?
Yeah, Enoch, that's after Methuselah.
Okay. Oh, this is interesting. And in the 2nd week of the 10th Jubilee, Mahalalel took unto him his wife Dinah, the daughter of Barachiel, the daughter of his father's brother, and she bare him a son in the 3rd week in the 6th year. And he called his name Jared, for in his days the Malachim of Yahweh descended on the earth, and those who are named the watchers, that they should instruct the children of men, and that they should do judgment and uprightness on the earth. And in the 11th, okay. Well,
So Enoch was the father of Methuselah, not the other way around. I don't know why I kept saying Methuselah is the father of Enoch. Enoch was the father of Methuselah.
Methuselah was the father of Noah.
Well, Lamech was the father of Noah. Methuselah would have been Noah's grandfather.
Was it?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
So Methuselah was the dad.
No, he was the granddad of Noah. So Enoch would have been Noah's great granddad.
Yeah, Lamech. Yeah, son was Noah. Okay.
Yeah,
Is that interesting what I just said? Nothing? No
yeah.
comment.
Well,
I'm waiting for Genesis 6.
yeah, I was gonna say, I'm sure that stuff's gonna come up again a lot in the next chapter.
All right. I didn't know. Well, I'm in Jubilee, so I can't tell what chapter I'm in.
Well, for anybody who's listening to this in the future and you want to know more about this kind of stuff that Lori just read, go read The Unseen Realm by Michael Heiser, and you'll get a lot more.
I jokingly said it was age accountability, but then I got to thinking, they lived a lot longer.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've wondered, because I told you there's people out there who have this. Some people have this theory that if Adam would have lived to 1,000 without ever sinning, he would have got to been translated or taken or whatever into paradise, into heaven, without having to die. Well, here's something interesting with Enoch, that we're told that he walked with God 300 years. So what if 1,000 wasn't the supposed time of testing? That if you're sinless for 1,000, then you're able to go in. Like, what if it was 300? Like, I wonder if that means that Adam and Eve were not, like, they didn't even make it to 300 years old before they got
Adam
kicked.
lived in 930.
No, I'm saying that they didn't even make it to 300 before they got kicked out of the garden.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Which would make sense, because as far as we can tell, they had no children yet until after they got kicked out.
It's interesting thought that, like, basically Enoch didn't really displease God during that 365 years.
I can read you the Targum. It says, and Enoch served in truth before the Lord after he had begotten Methuselah for 300 years. And during these years he begot sons and daughters, and all the days of the life of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch served in truth before the Lord, and it is not known where he is, because he was withdrawn by a command from before the Lord.
What does that mean?
It does seem to kind of mean that, he lived upright and then something happened.
Well, it says for 300 years. So he lived a total he was here for a total of 365 years. But it
Yeah,
says he,
same
but it,
thing the Bible says.
but it says he walked with God 300,
That's what
which
Yeah,
this,
makes
the Targum said that he was in truth for 300.
which makes me wonder, does that mean that for 65 years of his life he was like a lot of other people and he had sin and he had sin in his life, but there was like a 300-year stretch, like the last 300 years of his life, he never sinned? Like, I mean, obviously Jesus is the only one to live a full life without sin. Does that mean that in this that he sinned for the first 65 years of his life, but then for the last 300 he never sinned? Like, is that what it means, that he walked with God in truth?
Or does it mean you're born in sin? And he didn't turn till
Well,
until he was
well,
65?
no, I don't think anyone. Well, we covered that last time. Well, it wasn't recorded.
Right.
I definitely don't think anyone's born in sin. But what if he was born perfect, just like everyone is? I think. But then he ended up sinning like everybody does as they grow and get older. But what if after his 65th year, I wonder what if he didn't sin anymore after his 65th year until for the next 300 years? You know, I don't know. I don't know what that phrase means. I don't know what all that entails. Did he walk
Yeah,
with God?
walk with God kind of does sound like, not necessarily that he, like, had a stroll down the street or a sidewalk together, but that he did good things.
he was in
Or,
relation. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, he was in a relationship with God for 300 years.
Didn't Adam walk in the garden with God?
Uh,
mhm.
I think, well, I think that we all assume that. I don't know if there's an actual verse that says that. Do we have one? I don't, I mean, I think we all assume that.
Talk to him, we know that.
Yeah, they talked, they communicated. They heard the noise or the voice or the sound of the Lord God walking. Um, well, before we move on, let me just throw this in here since we're talking about Enoch. Two New Testament references. One is Hebrews 11 verse 5. It says, "By faith Enoch was taken away, so that he did not see death, and was not found, because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony, that he pleased God."
Well,
Supposedly, some of the things I was reading just a moment ago is that Enoch was preaching about Christ and baptism.
Oh, well, where did you read that, Rob?
Yeah, just Google. It was just like one of those snippets. It didn't really say where it was from per se.
Okay, well, the Hebrews 11:5 is one reference about Enoch did not see death. God took him. He pleased God. The other reference is in the book of Jude, verse 14. It says, "Now Enoch, the seventh from Adam." So we know. I'm glad that Jude throws that phrase in there. That way we're not confused, because like, which Enoch are we dealing with here that Jude's talking about? Because as we just talked about, there's different Enochs. You got the Enoch in chapter 4 of Genesis, which is from Cain's lineage. You got the Enoch in chapter 5, which is from Seth's lineage. But I think Jude clears it up for us and lets us know the Enoch that he's talking about is the one in Seth's lineage in chapter 5 of Genesis, because it says the seventh from Adam. Well, if you count from Adam through Seth's lineage, you get Enoch as number 7.
what is,
Prophesied about these men, saying, "Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his saints, holy ones."
That's interesting. So he did maybe prophesy about Christ.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it says he prophesied about these men. Well, so much of what the book of Jude has been talking about has been about the last days Old Covenant Israel that was guilty of having Jesus and his followers killed. But Enoch prophesied about their destruction. Like he prophesied about the Lord coming with tens of thousands of his holy ones, right? Obviously in judgment. I think Zechariah 14 also kind of talks about that. So interesting that you got Genesis. So already this early on in the Bible, from the book of Genesis, you've already got all these prophecies, all these things that are being spoken about that would not be fulfilled until the first century. Genesis 3:15 was about first century events. Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about first century events, according to Jude. And obviously, the name meanings in Genesis chapter 5 also are about first century events. We haven't got into that, but I guess now's as good a time as any because we're pretty much toward the end of the chapter. Everybody on here probably already knows about the name meanings in Genesis 5. I'm trying to remember, make sure I hadn't forgot them. From Adam to Noah, the names mean man appointed mortal sorrow. The blessed God shall come down teaching. His death shall bring the despairing rest or comfort, depending on how you translate Noah, rest or comfort. Very, very interesting. I always like bringing that up to people about God's plan of salvation in Genesis chapter 5 and the name meanings.
What do you think of Cain's name?
What does Cain's name mean?
I know what it means. What do you think it means?
I don't know what Cain's name means. I could look it up.
Fired.
You say tired, fired, or
Fired.
The Hebrew baby names, the meaning of the name Cain is spear, possessed.
Interesting. Acquired. Same thing. Possessed.
acquired.
Well, God, when he cursed the serpent, he said that dust you shall eat all the days of your life. Well, man is made up of dust. Well, man is spirit, but he also has dust. He has a body. So man is sometimes said to be dust. Dust you are, dust you shall return. The serpent was told he would, was it Genesis 3:14? Dust you shall eat all the days of your life. Well, I believe until AD 70, he was able to eat dust or possess people, you could say. All the days of his life until AD 70. So,
But what does that mean for Cain, though? That's the serpent.
well, if I wonder if Cain was, I guess some people might think he was possessed in the sense of he was possessed with jealousy because he killed his brother. Some people might think he was possessed by a demon to do the things that he did. Yeah, I think we talked about Judas recently. Judas was someone who had a covetous heart, a wicked heart, and because of that, it talked about Satan entered into him the night that he went out to betray Jesus. I don't know how much of that is the individual person versus how much of it is the thing possessing them. But interesting to think about. Genesis 5.
Was Lamech was Noah's dad, right?
Yes.
I don't know what this is weird. I can't really find anything, but it says Cain. It's just Google, honestly. It says Cain was killed at the hands of his great grandson Lamech, who mistaken for a wild beast. How could Lamech be Cain's grandson? Wasn't he Seth's grandson?
Well, there's another Lamech in Genesis chapter 4. Remember, Lamech married 2 women?
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
And he was like the great grandson or great grandson of whatever great of Cain.
Okay, I'm just throwing this out there. You got Enoch and Lamech, and Satan, or the serpent or the devil is said to like copy, and then you have Enoch and Lamech and the other line, which is kind of interesting or weird.
After Lamech, you got Methuselah, the oldest guy in the Bible that we have record of, verse 27.
Say that again.
Verse 27, after Lamech, you've got Methuselah. He was the, well, not after him, but it says, so all the days of Methuselah were 969 years and he died. So Methuselah had Lamech as his son, and then he lived 969 years and he died.
Okay, this is interesting. So, okay, now I just said Lamech killed Cain.
Yep.
So what they're saying is, remember how we read last time, when Lamech says, "Hey, I killed a man," and then he killed Cain,
Oh.
and so supposedly, this is the story. In Genesis 4:24, it says the punishment for killing Cain was very bad, but the punishment for killing me will be many times worse. So maybe he said, I killed Cain, and now that's why I'm going to be punished even worse because I killed the guy that was supposed to have, this bounty on him.
Right.
So, I mean, it kind of makes sense.
Okay. Well, we got just a few verses left here, just about Noah.
The only other thing that I wanted to mention was on Enoch. Some people think that because he was taken 365, it has something to do with the 365 days in a year.
Yeah, that is strange that it's 365. Verse 29, he called his name Noah, saying, "This one will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord has cursed." After he begot Noah, Lamech lived 595 years, had sons and daughters. All the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begot Shem, Ham, Japheth.
The other thing I guess I wanted to mention was everyone else dies here, but you know, it doesn't mention anything about the death of Enoch.
Yeah, I read, I brought up Hebrews 11, verse 5, that said, Enoch did not see death,
Mhm.
which makes me think that even though he didn't go to heaven, because nobody's been to heaven, nobody could go into heaven until Jesus was, as the first fruit, would go in. Could it not be possible that he did go to Sheol or paradise, whatever you want to call it, without having to go there the way that all other people go, how everyone else goes, by physically taking your last breath? Just point out that it says, because of the ground which the Lord has cursed. I know some people don't like the idea that God can curse things, or that God can do anything that would be viewed as mean, or upsetting. But this says the ground the Lord cursed. So
Just wanted a quick thing back up on Enoch. I guess where it says he took them. I guess some people think that means that he did die, which is kind of interesting. But then
about
Hebrews 11:5 says he didn't die.
right. I see. I could get on board, and I could agree with people, understand where they're coming from about the phrase "took him" to mean die, because because sometimes it talks about, when the flood came. Jesus says when the flood came in the days of Noah, the flood took them all away, which means it killed them. So that phrase "took away" certainly can mean people die, but that doesn't really work in the case of um, Enoch, because the text specifically says he did not see death.
Yeah, the only thing that I know Albert says that just means that he didn't see anyone die, like Abel.
Oh, because so it's he didn't live long enough to see people die.
And so basically, from the story that I was reading, is that Enoch was righteous, but he could have turned to evil, so God killed him shortly, meaning before he had a chance to do any evil.
That's kind of how I think about when God ordered like children to be killed in the Old Testament. God was actually doing them a favor, because being omniscient, he knew that they would grow up to be horrible, even worse than their ancestors, and so he actually did them a favor. Um,
Yeah, and I mean they wouldn't have parents too, which was somewhat interesting.
mhm.
If he didn't kill the children, I mean, would have they lived anyways? With no parents.
And in my
They would have to be adopted.
right, and in my view of age of accountability, it actually meant that they were all saved. I don't think God sends children to hell, in my view.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, an idea. If Enoch did die, he would have been like a baby compared to,
Mhm.
or a young teen compared to, Methuselah or Noah
Yeah,
and these other
it is.
gentlemen.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about, like after the flood, when all the lifespans drastically dropped. It seemed like when people were living to be like around 100, God God held them accountable from 20 years old and up, 20 years old and upward, but not if he didn't hold them to the same standard of accountability if they were under 20. I wonder what the accountability stuff was like before the flood when they were living like,
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I said that jokingly, but then I got to think about it. I'm like, yeah, maybe it was 65.
yeah, you know, it really could be. It really could be something like that. That would make sense, actually.
Yeah, maybe Adam and Eve didn't sin till after they're 65. You know?
Yeah, that's very possible, especially since they lived to be 930 years old. It's a long time.
Interesting that it's about the age of retirement too.
Yeah. Anybody got any other thoughts on Genesis chapter 5?
I guess just Lamech's death is very also interesting. 777 years.
Yeah, lots of sevens there.
Mm-hmm.
Shem, Ham, Japheth. I guess we'll talk about them more in the future chapters, so we don't have to get into it now. They'll come up again. All right. Genesis 6 next time.